They gathered under moonlight, bare feet pressed to the earth, faces painted in sacred patterns, eyes lifted to the stars. But they weren't praying to Jesus. Not yet. Before the arrival of the cross, before the hymns in cathedrals, before the scriptures were translated into tongues never meant to contain them, Africa remembered the gods of the rivers, the spirits of the mountains, and the whispers of the ancestors who never truly died. In the shadows of ancient baobab trees, elders told stories not just for entertainment, but for survival. Stories of divine twins who guarded the balance of life and death. Of queens who spoke to spirits in dreams. Of blacksmiths who forged destinies with iron and incantation. This is the spiritual heritage of Africa, older than empires, deeper than dogma, and still breathing beneath the surface of history. Long before the 4th century AD, when Emperor Ezana of Aksum declared Christianity the official religion of one of Africa's great empires, Africa was not a spiritual blank slate waiting to be written upon. Noit's soul was already full. Let's go back to 5,000 years before the Common Era. In the fertile floodplains of the Nile Valley, before even the pharaohs, African priests of Kemet, what we now call ancient Egypt, stood in temples aligned with the stars. They practiced Ma'at, the principle of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. Ma'at was not a goddess alone, but a universal law, an ethical code woven into the heart of African metaphysics. These were not merely pagan superstitions. This was philosophy, science, spirituality. The earliest known text from the coffin texts and the pyramid textsum, dating back to 2400 BCE, reveal a deep understanding of life after death, energy, and transformation. The soul was called the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak, each reflecting different layers of the spiritual self. And Kemet was not alone. Further west, in the forests of modern-day Nigeria, the Yoruba people were building a spiritual cosmology so intricate it would later rival Greek philosophy. Their supreme being, Olodumare, was beyond gender, beyond form, but it was the Orisha's divine intermediaries like Shango, god of thunder, or Osun, goddess of love and fertility, who made the divine relatable. Yoruba spirituality, encoded in oral poetry and divination rituals like Ifa, emphasized community, harmony with nature, and ancestral guidance. It's a living system that has survived slavery, colonization, and forced conversion, spreading across continents through the African diaspora from Cuba's Santeria to Brazil's Candomblé. Meanwhile, in the lands of the Congo, the BaKongo cosmology envisioned life as a spiraltha dikenga, sacred cross, marking the sun's journey and the soul's transformation. Birth, life, death, rebirth. For the Congo people, the veil between the living and the ancestors was thin. The Nkisi, sacred containers of power, embodied spirits that could heal, protect, or punish. Even in the deserts of the Horn of Africa, among the Cushitic-speaking peoples of Ethiopia and Sudan, spiritual systems predated Christianity. The Sabians of Aksum worshipped the moon god, Almaka, and revered stars as celestial beings. Archaeological ruins in Yeha and Hawulti reveal temples built long before the Book of Acts claimed that an Ethiopian eunuch carried the gospel south. But perhaps one of the most misunderstood truths about Africa's spiritual legacy is this: the ancestors were never worshipped. They were remembered, honored, consulted. Just as one might ask a grandmother for wisdom or a fallen father for strength, Africans understood the dead not as gone but as elevated. To speak the name of an ancestor was to keep them alive. To forget them was the second death. So what happened? Why did so much of this spiritual ecosystem get erased, demonized, or forgotten? The answer is not simple. It begins with traders and missionaries, with Portuguese caravels sailing down the coasts in the 15th century, bringing Catholicism wrapped in conquest. It deepens with British, French, and German colonizers who burned shrines, banned rituals, and rewrote spiritual systems as witchcraft. But even before colonization, the seeds were sown. When Christianity arrived in North and East Africa in the first centuries after Christ, it came peacefully at first through trade routes, curiosity, and scholarship. In Nubia, kings embraced Christianity while preserving their African customs. The temples of Meroe were repurposed, not destroyed. But over time, the Bible became a weapon. Missionaries taught that African gods were demons, that the drum was evil, that the mask was cursed. An entire continent was told that their spiritual past was shameful. But it was not. And it is not. In the words of Malidoma Some, a Dagara elder and author of Water and the Spirit, to be born African is to be born spiritual. He describes being kidnapped by Jesuits in colonial Burkina Faso, forced into Christian indoctrination, only to later return to his village and rediscover the wisdom of his ancestors through initiation into the spirit world. His journey is one of thousands. Africans across the continent are waking up, not to reject Christianity, but to remember what came before. Not to dishonor the cross, but to understand the staff, the mask, the drum, the fire, and the river. Today, scholars like Dr. Jacob Olopona at Harvard and Dr. John Mbiti have brought African traditional religions into academic light, documenting their complexity, resilience, and sacred philosophy. Documentaries like Africa, The Story of a Continent by Basil Davidson and Nollywood Babylon explore how African spirituality still shapes art, film, and identity. But there are still mysteries. Like the Dogon of Mali, who knew of Sirius Ba, star invisible to the naked eye centuries before European telescopes confirmed its existence. They say they learned it from Namo, ancestral spirits from the sky. Myth, perhaps, but it makes you wonder. Or the ancient Zimbabwean stone structures of Great Zimbabwe. How did builders shape stone into perfect interlocking walls with no mortar? And what gods were honored there before missionaries arrived? And what of the rainmakers of the Zulu? The sky-speaking shamans of the Sand People? The sacred groves of the Igbo, now bulldozed for highways? The past is not dead. It is not even past. Africa's spiritual heritage is not primitive. It is profound. It is not lost. It is waiting. Waiting in the bones of the land, in the names we still carry, in the stories our grandmothers whisper before sleep. So, next time you hear that Africa had no gods before Christianity, no soul before the Bible, no truth before the missionaries, ask yourself, why would someone work so hard to erase what was never theirs? And if it was truly meaningless, why does it still haunt the edges of history? Thank you for journeying with us into this forgotten but sacred terrain. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What ancestral traditions still live in your family? What histories have yet to be told? This is History Off the Map, where memory has a heartbeat. And the next story? It might just be buried beneath your feet.